All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to our latest online artist talk presented by the Maloof. I am, as always, your host, Seth Pringle. I'm the program manager at the Sam and Alfreda Maloof Foundation for Arts and Crafts. I'm very excited that our guest artist today presenting his work is Raul Pizarro. Real quick, we have an important announcement. Let me just get a few more people in from the waiting room here. Get everybody in here. We will be reopening the Maloof on June 20th for Father's Day weekend. So we hope everyone will be able to come visit soon. It's going to be different than normal. You do have to reserve a time slot and purchase a ticket for a specific time slot. I'm not going to get into all the details here. I just want you to go to our website and check out what your options are for coming in and visiting us. You can visit the gallery where we have a thriving artist community on display, which is a photo exhibition of local artists. Raul was one of the artists in this photo exhibition, photos of artists in their homes and studios, photography courtesy of Tom and Tony Bostick. So this online artist talk series is an extension of that photography exhibition. Without further ado, I'm going to introduce Raul. Actually, I forgot to mention, at the end, we will be doing a question and answer. So feel free to write your questions in the little chat box at the bottom of your screen at any time, and then we'll get to those at the end. All right, so Raul Pizarro is a self-taught queer Latinx visual artist with muscular dystrophy. Born in Mexicali, Mexico, the third of four siblings, Raul and his family migrated to Southern California, the place that reared him and became home after the age of 3. He grew up in the city of Pomona, a short stroll from the artist's district. Raul's professional work bridges diverse themes and spans over 25 years. Each piece of art emerges from his experience at the intersection of disability, LGBTQ identity, race and ethnicity, family and community. Raul believes art needs to be reclaimed by our communities and embraced by the formal art world. Among his proudest achievements is Raul's residency with Self-Help Graphics in Los Angeles. Raul worked with a master printmaker to produce several prints of Sharia and became part of various Latinx collections at museums and universities nationwide. Raul was also one of our artists invited to participate in the singular Los Angeles's Community of Angels project. The Daw Center for the Arts was the first gallery to exhibit Raul's work and recently hosted his first retrospective, which encompassed over 70 pieces, including his first painting completed at the age of 3, which is when art became Raul's preferred language. And if you missed that show, you missed out, because that was an amazing exhibition. Thank you for joining us, Raul. I'm going to hand it over to you.
Hello, thank you for joining us today, and I hope that we're going to have a pretty good conversation.
All right, here we go with the slideshow.
All right. So this is one of my earlier pieces. I made this when I was raised in a pretty astringent religion, and this is a piece I made when I left the church, and it was about reclaiming my space within, sitting in my own truths, and how there was like a big void that was left the church, and it was kind of like the beginning of the life that I have now. This was also around the same time. This was one of the largest pieces I did at the time. It was about 4 feet by 4 feet, and I was exploring with different mediums and textures, and also it was about trying to accept my body the way it is and how it's not going to be something that ever really fits in to the idea of masculinity and the way that I was expected to look as a at that age, and so it was mostly just like facing myself, and I did this in my very early 20s. Next. This was actually one of my very first paintings. I believe it was either the first or the second, and I painted this. Well, I had painted before, but it was the first time I explored in oil paints, and we actually Seth and I spoke about having the same professor, David Amico, and this was the first time I took a art class, and the only time I took an art class, and this was in college. I believe I was about 18, and he taught me how to make my canvas out of using supplies from hardware stores, and so it was mounted on wood. I'm not sure if you learned the same technique, Seth, by David. And so we mounted this on wood, and this was the first time I had oil paint because it was kind of expensive. I couldn't really afford to have it, and this was gifted to me by one of my junior high teachers. And she gave me all of the art supplies that I believe it was her grandmother had left. So I used some pretty old paint, and I painted this, and it was about around the same time that I left the church. It was also exploring, basically trying to find myself and my identity, and I was coming out to myself and to select friends at the time, and it felt very it felt very like I was really exposed, and I wanted to face that in my work as well, and that's what this piece is about. I believe it's titled "The Noche," which means during the nighttime, and that was around the time that everything became quiet around me, and I had to face my truths, and that's what this painting is about. It's about coming out, and the fear and the complications that comes with that, with relationships within my family and close friends at the time. Go to the next one. And this is a painting I made so a lot of folks don't know that I was actually able to walk for the majority of my life. And it was very challenging. I would fall quite a bit. I have a neuromuscular disease, which is called, it's muscular dystrophy, but the one that I have is, it's pretty rare. And usually muscular dystrophy, folks stop walking before they get to the age of 11 or 12, and I was walking until I think I stopped walking at 32. I'm currently 44, and this was a really pivotal time for me. because I was really stubborn and didn't want to use a wheelchair because I felt that it would mean that I was giving up. And it was it was really difficult because no matter how hard I tried and held on to walls or whatever it had to be for me to be able to prop myself up to get places, I would still fall, and it started affecting my participations with galleries because I wasn't able to walk to the spaces anymore, and I was afraid of falling constantly, and it was just causing a lot of anxiety and really strange amounts of guilt as well when it came to disability. And one of my friends gave me this chair, this power chair, and he said, you know, just try it out, see how you feel about it, use it at home. And it was a little strange for the first, just maybe the first hour or so. And then I realized how liberated I felt with it. And I was able to move around easily in ways that I don't think I'd been able to move at that time for years because it started getting difficult. Walking started to get really difficult at around probably 11, 12, and then even more and more difficult, and then impossible by the time I started using this chair. And the chair, it was kind of like it saved me in a way because it gave me like, it introduced me back into life. And that's what this painting was about. And it was also, when it comes to my disability, I at the time I was forcing myself to see it by painting it in large scale on canvases, so I would get used to it and make it normal and add like a sense of power and sometimes beauty in spaces that I didn't know were allowed. I didn't know that I could create this new life for myself and own it in my own way. And this painting here was at the very entrance of my retrospective at the DAW, and it was a way to welcome people who have disabilities as well, so that they know that this is a space for them as well. Because I feel like lots of art spaces don't feel very welcoming to people with disabilities, and that's why I placed this at the in the entrance to the exhibition. And we can go to the next one. This is one of the very first, I believe it was the first painting I made for possibly my very first series. I worked on this for about 10 years. Not this painting, but the series itself. And I had different friends that I knew very personally were the first to post for me. The title of the series is Songs for a Deaf God, and it was about making peace with my past and trying to find just the truth that I could hang on to in my youth, because I was very devout as a youth. I really wanted to believe that things were that had like they had divine plans that would fall into place, and then that started changing at about 15, and then I challenged, well, lots of my ideas that ideas that I was taught were challenged with the truth that I lived in, being disabled, being queer, and being an artist, and trying to find like trying to find peace with the past. And that's what this very first piece is about. It's about finding the divine in the moment, with connections with our memories and our connections with friends and the new. It was just like it was a time of rebirth for me with my new friends, who I felt were my true friends, because it's when I really shared who I was with people, and it brought my new friends and into my life. And this is kind of like this series is kind of like a little ethereal. It's kind of in its space that's floating, and there's no absolute truths in it, and there's still connections to the idea that we are connected, not in a religious way, but in the fact that we are all on the same planet, and we're all alive, and we share lots of the same experiences. And that's what this first piece was about. And we can go to the next one. This is also about the same ideas, but this is kind of like an idea that the memories of so when I was in church, I think that the thing that kind of stayed with me was feeling that there was a connection waiting. I didn't have it at the time because I felt very isolated and very different, especially the way that I thought and was within the ideas of what I should have been in the church. And I felt like I really wanted a connection with someone that would understand and accept me. And it just felt so distant. And that's what the feather is about. It's about like, it's almost like a whisper that there is someone else or other people who can share that connection with us. And I believe it's something that a lot of us feel. And it's it was at the time something that I didn't really have words for, and I still kind of struggle with that at times, which is why I mostly communicate through my art. And we can go to the next one. This is in the same series, and this is, I did a few pieces with Moths and Butterflies because that was when my body started to change quite drastically. I started to lose a lot of muscle mass. I was never very muscular. I was always pretty skinny, but I my body looked a lot more, I hate the word average, but like you couldn't really see that I was quite as disabled just yet. My muscles were still there and they were starting to atrophy, which on me, it just made my arms a lot bonier. It made my body bonier. And my body just started changing. And at the time, I was also trying to find my identity within the queer community. And I thought that it would be a lot easier than what it actually was. There are a lot of complications and lots of problematic things within the queer community. And I definitely also didn't fit the status quo of what the ideal queer person would look like. And I just also felt a little lost. And that's what this piece is about. It's about feeling isolated and being forced to evolve in a way that I didn't really know which direction it would take. And this was a portrait of my friend Anthony, who I met through social media at the time, and we became pretty good friends. He's a poet, and a lot of his poetry really resonated with me. It was the birth of this painting, and it was I believe this was in my 20s as well. We can go to the next one. And so I made quite a few pieces for this series. Each one took quite a while, maybe between 3 to 4 months to create each one. And this was one of the last ones I did in the series before I shifted into animals. This was at the time when I was already using my wheelchair, and I felt like that was about the worst it could get physically wise. And then life came along and did what it did, and forced me to realize that muscular dystrophy actually continues, and whatever you have that's a muscle will continue to basically disappear over time. And then it started affecting my heart as well. And that's what this piece is about. It's about trying to continue to pursue art and painting, and how difficult it was becoming. I wasn't able to really work as long anymore at this point. My body started to hurt a lot more, and I couldn't really sit very long. So I started really, I was listening to operas, and I was really moved by one, I believe it was the Magic Flute, and the evolution that happened throughout the play. And for some reason it made me think of the Daedalus story and Icarus, and trying to fly too high, and how the wings that they created weren't sustainable. And that's the way that I felt at the time. That was my truth. My dreams weren't very sustainable, and I created this. And the quill is about the arms from above are fate and the way that they decide our decides our life, whether no matter how hard we try to do our own thing, like fate is overriding a lot of our goals, but at the same time, it's also showing the wings that I created, which I actually made in real life. I made them out of rice paper because I couldn't find the right reference to make the wings with the right shades, and so I just made mine, and it's kind of like a combination again of what was happening. A lot of my work is about reclaiming my strength in a way that isn't involving my body, and finding strength in that weakness, in that loss, and being able to reclaim it for myself and seeing where I was at the time, because I know that it will continue to change as it has now. This painting I created almost, I believe, 9 years ago. And so since then, like, a lot of things have changed. But I'm still working, thankfully. And we can go to the next one. This was also from Songs for a Deaf God. This was my friend Kat who posed for this, and it was, I believe it was the second piece I made for the series. And a lot of my work doesn't involve people standing because I couldn't really relate to that at that point of my life. It was about finding tranquility and peace in moments where I was just forced to think about it when I would be in bed trying to fall asleep, but all these things were swirling through my mind. And that's where this painting began. And it's interesting because it wasn't supposed to look this way. I had initially started working on my friend's on painting her body, and for me to move around, I have to swing my arms quite a bit, like sustaining one arm with the other arm, and sometimes since they're kind of floppy, accidents happen and I'll knock stuff over. And during one of those times, I knocked over a pretty large amount of paint, and it splattered onto it splattered all over the canvas. And I kind of just had to laugh because I'd been working on it for so long, and it felt so oh my gosh, I'm not remembering the word, but it was like just reminding me, like, this is the way life really is. Like, no matter how hard you try to make things a certain way, life comes along and it just happens. And I sat with it for a minute, and then I just I spilled more paint on it, and I just let it evolve into these like astro poppies, and it became what it was. And I it's one of my favorite paintings because of that moment, that memory. And this is actually titled Songs for a Deaf God. We can go to the next one.
So before we move on. You actually got a question from Barbara about the significance of your crossed fingers in the Daedalus Icarus self-portrait. I thought I'd bring that question up before we get much further. Do you have any insights on that?
Yeah, the crossed fingers are, like when we're hoping for the best. And it's placed right over my heart because at that time I started developing like some irregular heart rhythms, and I was, at the time they didn't really have a certain diagnosis because we hadn't done the genetic testing at the time because it was pretty expensive. And I was hoping that it wasn't the type of muscular dystrophy that I thought it was, which it turned out that it is. I found that out later, a few years after that. And yeah, that's what the crossed fingers are. And, it's about like we could hope as much as we want, but fate is still going to write its truth over it.
Excellent. Okay, I'll move you forward here.
This is from the same series. So the series is, it's mostly like a development of growing into, when I became an adult, and all of the ideas that I had that I thought were true, all of these like things that were being challenged. And it's about facing mental illness as well. And that's what this piece is about. It's about the way that we craft these ideas in our mind, which is, it's an origami horse that's kind of like a, like this magical, mystical idea of who we are and who I thought I was and what I thought was factual, only to realize that it was something that I had completely been given, and I folded it into this, and I created this narrative for myself. And it's about forcing myself to face it and kind of poke at it and really examine it and just really see what it was. It was this construct that I had been given and that I thought was true for myself, and it wasn't. And a little side note, all of my friends that have posed for me have they've kind of like been almost like these really giving vessels where they let me like explore things that I couldn't do with my own body, like poses with theirs. And so this is kind of like what's happening in a lot of these paintings. They're kind of like self-portraits, but through someone else's body that they let me borrow for a moment to explore these ideas. You can go to the next one. And so this is one of those paintings that I did that were on gender and identity and a lot of just a lot of I'm kind of surrounded, well, lots of us are surrounded by lots of toxic ideas of what gender is and isn't. And it's, the title of this is Noche de Ronda, which means kind of like a night of debauchery. And it was at the time, like I discovered an elixir called tequila. And I really, at the time, I'd have like a drink or two by myself, and I would really like explore what I thought about um, gender roles and how everything was really fluid, and how I never really believed a lot of the things that I thought were supposed to be for each true for each gender. And at the time, I'd also met a lot of new people, and this is one of my friends who I met who was very instrumental in these pieces. And so the setting is, of course, in the dark, which is where I worked at the time. I would only paint at night. I'd work like from maybe like 6 or 7 at night until maybe 4 in the morning, when everything was quiet, and I was able to really explore these truths. And I wanted to create like a space for my friends where they could be in a spot that was honoring them and their bodies and their identity. And this is also why I used a moth in there, because it was about um, the the evolution of growing into who we are and who they are, and finding their power and their expressions and their truths. And that's I did a few pieces on this, and they were also for Songs for a Deaf God. And we can go to the next one. This is my same friend. This is Ocean with No Ebb, and this one is possibly one of my all-time favorite paintings. I really enjoyed working on this. I really took my time on this because it was a time where I started really finding peace in my life. I started finding like just this really quiet sense of acceptance, and I didn't really need any other answers at the time. I had all of these questions, but I was okay with them. And it's about love, and it's almost like in its like a romantic sense of connecting with life, that it's kind of like that bridge between um it's kind of cheesy, but like of what love would feel like and what love actually feels like, and how I didn't really need like an external body or person or anyone else to have that moment. And I felt like this was also a moment where this is also a time that I met one of my really close friends named Shakina, who was transitioning at the moment as well. This isn't her. I'm going to be creating a portrait of her soon. But this is around the time when all of the moments of like of what love could be and was born, and that's why I used lotus because I've always been very drawn to them and the way that they grow in really murky waters, and they just become like these ethereal flowers that almost look like they don't belong on this earth with the way that they glow. And it's just it was a really beautiful moment in my life. We can go to the next one. This is also based on gender. This is titled Gender Tree. And this is a story that one of my friends shared with me, who is lesbian. And when she was little, she, like most kids, loved playing, really rambunctious, loved climbing trees. And until I believe her mom, or possibly one of her teachers, told her that she was no longer allowed to climb trees because girls don't climb trees according to them. And it was just about the sadness that she felt of realizing that there was these like limiting ideas placed on her because of her gender, or the idea of her gender, her projected gender. And it's kind of like I made this because I wanted her to be able to find that moment again and know that it wasn't something, it wasn't true. And I know that she knows it wasn't true, but in the back of her mind, it kind of like lingered and kind of like left this like almost like this festering it just damaged, it left like damage behind that just needed to heal. And I wanted this to be like a little, almost like a love note to her, to let her know that she's always been perfect, and that it's okay to revisit those moments, and that we could revisit them together as friends, which I think a lot of really close friends can do. You can go to the next one. So this is a big departure from the previous work I was working on. I at this time I was I fell into a really deep depression without knowing I was depressed. This is about 10 years ago. This painting isn't, but when I started painting bears was when I wasn't in a very good place, and I started feeling like I couldn't really contribute anything to life. I was weaker and weaker, and I was missing out on lots of shows that I wanted to participate in, but I could never, I could no longer drive, so I couldn't get there. And I kind of just like fell out of the art scene for some time, about a few years at that time, because I couldn't get to spaces. And it was just really challenging and difficult and depressing. And around that time, my brother had his first baby, which was my nephew. And at the time, they moved in to the house next door to my parents' house. And I started spending time with my baby nephew at the time, and he wouldn't want to eat breakfast unless I would feed him. And so I'd get up early and I'd eat breakfast with him every day to make sure he'd, eat his breakfast. And it was just like this really neat connection. And I started, in a really weird way, it sounds really cheesy, but I started to feel like I could actually like give back in a way. And once he started getting a little older, he was nonverbal for the first few years. And so to get him to talk, I'd ask him, he really liked bears. And I'd ask him like what he wanted me to draw a bear doing for him. Like, and he would use a few words like bear, dancing bear, or bear noni, which means sleeping bear. And so like I would draw these bears for him in different situations, dancing or reading, and that's where these paintings began. And I kind of like, I started feeling joy again, and that's what this whole series seems to be about. Not just joy. I mean, there's really poignant moments, which, I mean, joy is an incredible gift that we don't have very often, especially during these times. But I felt like I found a new chapter in my life with these bears, because we can go to the next one. I really relate to bears in a way because they're really cute in photos and videos, but they're really ferocious and they can destroy very easily. And that's kind of the way I feel humanity is. We build, but we also can destroy very easily. And there's lots of books in literatures in these paintings, because they are little homages to my nephews and nieces, and about letting their worlds grow through literature, and the importance of stories and other stories of people who may seem to be very different from us, and all the connections and the knowledge that we can gain through the different experiences in literature. And that's what this one is. It's kind of like a mama goddess bear calling to the others to come and read a damn book. And go to the next painting. This is one of the recent paintings I made, and I had been wanting to paint this for a while, but the time wasn't right. I wasn't feeling too great, and I started. So this painting is rather large, and before I painted this, I was no longer able to paint large scale pieces because muscular dystrophy happens. And luckily, I have an incredible group of friends, and that's an understatement because they really are phenomenal people. My friend Shakina was hanging out with me once, and she asked me like, what my goals were, and I told her that, really far-fetched hope was be able to paint, even though I couldn't really move my arms into positions to raise my arms very well. This is basically as high as I can get them. And I wanted to work on larger pieces. So she said, okay, well, I'm going to make this happen. And she reached out to different people, some like really big engineer companies didn't respond, that made like these really neat like arm gadgets that would support you and help you move. But she was determined, and she found this really incredible group of folks through one of her friends, friend Nina and Tony. And Tony runs the Fab Lab out in, I'm not sure if he still does, but it's Northrop Grumman, which is a massive company who makes all sorts of stuff like for NASA and the military. So he had like this thing he called what do you call it, the hackathon, and he had a bunch of like engineer friends come together and make these different machines to help me paint, and they made this really amazing easel that would move the canvas for me, like up and down and left and right, and tilt it towards me. And so I was able to start working larger pieces. And that's when I created this using that easel. And this is also like, this is the bears kind of like, so at the end of every series, I make an altarpiece, kind of thanking life for what I gained during that time. And that's kind of what this is, like thanking this moment with bears and joy, with the knowledge that I kind of like. I use birds for that a lot because of all the symbolism and that they're messengers and all of this like silly stuff. It's also really beautiful, and it's kind of like a moment where you know I'm thinking both of these ideas that came together. And so from here I'm going to move back into painting people, so that's kind of like a thank you altar. And I believe there's a few more bear paintings in here, I think. You can go to the next one. This is also one of the pieces I did for, so this is one of those like paintings that aren't about joy. These are about pain. And I think it's important to acknowledge pain and not change what it is, because not everything in life, well, I've learned, like a lot of us, that not everything in life has a silver lining. Some things just are, and that's what this piece is about. This is like when, like right before I had to go in for cardiac surgery, and it was about like acknowledging the fear that came with that, and just, you know, the truth that, you know, life is painful for a lot of us at times. And there, it's kind of like it's kind of like a little shrine to that, because I believe that there's like a sacredness to feeling pain and just being honest with the pain and feeling it, and the transformation that it can bring. We can go to the next one. Oh, and I also made the frames for that previous painting. So this is kind of like the idea that I was speaking about earlier, about how birds, I mean bears, are cute and stuff, but they can also, they're beasts like us. And it's kind of like that moment when I realized that I can hold something that was very sacred, like a new birth, a new life, and that how fragile that can be in my clumsy hands as a human. That, you know, we have like these tendencies to be very selfish and destroy things, and taking the time out to like think outside of ourselves. And when I was small, we used to have a lot of trees on our property, and so there were lots of little, fledglings that fell out of their nests, and I'd usually try to save them, and of course I never did because I was a kid and I was accidentally feeding them top ramen, thinking that they'd be fine with that because it looked like worms, and it's just like it's just moments like when there's lots of complexities when we're trying to do right, and sometimes we do more damage, and it's just it's that moment. There's lots of like there's no like you know right thoughts sometimes until you live a little more, and that's what this is about. We can go to the next piece. This is a piece I did for the retrospective that we had this past December. This is a really large piece. This is about, I believe it's 6 feet tall. I use the easel as well. The one that they made for me. And this is kind of like so I'm atheist. I don't really believe in lots of the stuff that I thought was fact as a kid. And I kind of find my mind is really, really blown by the fact that we are alive and that we are floating in this like massive space that nobody can really measure yet. And it's just like it's just something that really makes me like happy in a really weird way to know that I'm alive in a moment like this. And it's kind of like a little kind of like a playful way of like of releasing that almost like a power to like just really marvel in life without like the old narratives I had, which are some of them are beautiful, some of them are really destructive, but I mean that's life, I guess, and it's about releasing the truth and releasing the facts that are around us. And that's what this piece is about. You can go to the next one. So this is a small series I did. It was I was gonna have a show, but unfortunately COVID-19 happened and everything closed. And this was a series I made called Donde Existir, which means where.
Cold. It appears to be clear right now in
Sorry,
the
that's
Dixie
my
state
phone.
with a temperature of 8.
It's about finding a safe space for women and just like all of the horrible things that are happening to women, a lot of femicide in Mexico and around the world. And it was also like an homage to my ancestors, to my grandmothers, and finding that thread to a space where we're still connected to them, like a place that they still exist, whether it's in a tactical fabric that they created and left. And just it's about this suspended memory and trying to hang on to that. And I think that the next piece is also from that series. We can go to the next one. Yeah. So I made some frames for these. We can go to the next one as well. These are from different regions of Mexico. And this is this is one of my niece's dresses. That is one of my favorites. I love seeing her in this because she seems really happy, and I just really I love my culture. It's a very warm culture, and I love the vibrancy that is my people, Mexican. We can go to the next painting. Is there a next painting? Oh, okay, yeah, there is. So this is the latest series I'm working on. There's 2 pieces I've made so far. They're in an odd shape because I found these really cool old picture frames I bought a few years ago, and I had these boards cut out to put them into those frames. So this is I made 2. There's a sheep, a baby lamb, and a baby goat, which is coming up in a bit. And these 2 pieces are about kind of like revisiting the idea of what was good and what was not growing up, like the idea of good, like how Jesus, the whole idea of Jesus being like this, like savior of man, and all of these ideas of, how everything good can come from, the teachings of Jesus. And it's kind of like putting it into like a contemporary moment that we're living in, where I feel like it's very political. It's about how like I feel like the whole idea of Jesus is kind of being rebranded, and he's the whole thought that if there was a little baby Jesus lamb around us, like he'd probably be in a space that lots of people wouldn't really explore, because this is the space that a lot of us live in. We live in spaces that are poor. They're not very well funded, and the idea of like it's kind of like it's the idea that this is like the new truths in a way of the sacred, and how they're, for me, they're found in places that a lot of people won't find appealing. My neighborhood is in an industrial area. We don't have sidewalks. We have potholes everywhere, and it's lots of buildings are very dilapidated, and there's a lot of, and it's cracked, it's broken, but it's beautiful. And there's birth and poetry that happens here. And that's what these pieces are about. They're about reclaiming that in a new way, in a new moment that I'm in, with a lot of us that live in similar areas. And we can go to the next one, and it's the next one, I believe, is the goat. Oh, this is a little detail, but we can go to the next one. This is the little goat, and this was about so when I was young, I was really like, I really wanted to make sense of the idea of what God was, the God that I was taught about. And so I'd read the Bible quite a bit, and a lot of the stories, some of them were really beautiful, others were very, very problematic for me. And but one of my favorites was about how, like, I never understood why the angel of light, which I guess is Lucifer, which is now the devil, was considered evil for wanting to find truth and independence. And I kind of love the idea that he didn't back. He didn't he didn't fear condemnation because he had this love for truth in a way. And it's kind of like finding that again in like a new context for me, where a lot of the stuff that I thought about myself was very demonized. I'm not sure if that's a word, but being queer, being disabled, it just never really fit in the narrative of the church I was raised in, because if I was disabled, it was because I didn't pray enough, or we'd have like these um, like special preachers that would come that had like these powers of healing, and of course they'd always like lock in on me when they go, because here I was like this disabled kid that they were going to fix in front of everybody, and of course that's not the way life works, unfortunately. And it was just about like finding that space again and healing it in a way for myself, and saying that like all of these things that I thought were like evil, and how I was bad for being disabled and for being queer, and for me, like, it's just like sitting in my own truth and revisiting it and saying that my truth has beauty, my truth has value. And this is kind of like my way of like creating a song, like music, and just like it's like an ethereal moment of rebirth as well, like it was with the lamb. And it's just about revisiting it as an older adult, after I've lived a lot longer than I was expected to, and just like sitting with that bravely without being afraid of like condemnation anymore. Like when you get really, I almost died last year from cardiac complications, and laying in bed, I found so much peace in knowing that I'd lived the way I'd lived, and I didn't really have a lot of regrets in who I was. I kind of like, that's what these paintings are about. They're about finding beauty in those moments where, everything that's kind of fleeting can change us, and it does. And we don't really, well, I didn't really notice it at the time as much until I was at the end, and all of these like truths just came back. And it's just about, that's what these last two pieces are about. They're about really embracing them and giving them like a platform where they can like exist in a space that doesn't have to be either or. It can just be just the way that I feel right now. And I'm going to hopefully create a few more pieces for this series. And that's, I think that's, is there more? It's a detail. all of the little this took quite some time, you can see. So the fur is glazing, which is really thin oil above other colors of oil to kind of give it a translucent look, which you can't really picture. I mean, you can't really see in images. You have to see it in person. This is just the details. We can go to the next if there are any. This is the pomegranate. I use a lot of pomegranates because they're sacred in lots of cultures, and also because they take me back to my childhood when we used to have a neighbor's had a pomegranate tree, and I just always, they felt like a treat to me because we didn't really have very much monetary wise, and these were like little gifts every time I was able to have one. Go to the next if there are any.
That is the final slide right there. All right, so I'm gonna stop the screen share. Thank you, Raul. That was really great to hear about all your pieces and your process. I think your work is very generous, and your presentation was maybe even more so. I just have to say, I was wondering about the transition between the older work and the bears and animals, and to hear the story that it was you know, inspired at least in part by your nephew, and your art had been giving you a voice, and it helped him literally gain his own voice. I found that very inspiring. So we'll do some Q&A. We've already got some great questions in the chat box. So I'm gonna read those, some of those off. We'll see how many we can get to. And comments are good too, even if you don't have a question. So let's see. I'm kind of going back to the beginning. So a couple of people are asking about your process, and Marie is asking if you use models and or photographs. I think somebody else also asked about that. Can you just speak to your process a little bit?
So when in terms of the people I've painted, they all posed, and then I took photos, and I used photo references because I'm way too slow to work with a live model. And the bears, some of them I actually made. I sculpted them before to get like the right proportions and light and shadow. So yeah, some of them are based off of sculptures I made.
That's interesting. I was wondering about the lighting. Seems to be very important, especially in the earlier pieces. There are a lot about the contrast between light and dark and illumination. And I was curious about if that was all drawing from the models and a setup scene, or do you also elaborate just from your own imagination with the lighting?
I use really dramatic lighting because that's the way the moment felt. It felt a very it was a changing time for me, and it was like trying to find, like, well, realizing that everything was really, it's mostly gray, and that's what the contrast is trying to achieve there. And I didn't really have to exaggerate it very much from the photos because I had pretty dramatic lighting in my studio.
So let's see. Somebody asks you what motivates you to keep painting. And do you find any type of divine inspiration through the process of your creations?
Well, I honestly paint because I feel like I have to. I feel like if I don't, I feel really guilty in a strange way. I feel like I'm wasting my life. It's kind of dramatic because it could just be like one day if I don't paint, I feel like I ruined everything. but, but I think it's also a part. It's a part of like knowing like life is very, 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 very short, and I'm really grateful for being able to work, and so I want to be able to use as much as that time I can to paint because my muscles are changing, no matter how hard I try and no matter what kind of medications I take, it's just a truth for myself. And I just love I love painting, and I think there is divine moments in it for me. Um, I find them quite often actually, and I really wish that I'd be better about documenting them because they're very fleeting. I just remember like the feeling of what that was, but I can't really articulate it very well verbally sometimes. And I also struggle a lot with language because a year back when I had all the complications, unfortunately I had a stroke as well, which really affected the lobe in my brain that where language is formed. And so I struggle a lot I know what the words are that I'm trying to articulate, but they're lost right when I'm trying to say them. So I'm learning a way of like weaving my way around them and trying to get to the point that I'm trying to make. And I feel like for me, art has been that for me. But in a way, like it's very liberating, but at the same time, it's very limiting because it's not someone else's experience. So it's seen or it comes through a different way. But at the same time, it's kind of liberating to let that go. So it can be an experience for them. And those are the divine moments for me while I'm working.
I have a question. You mentioned about maybe not being able to participate in some opportunities. Do you have any advice for galleries or art organizations in order to be more accessible?
Yeah, actually, I think that social media can be a huge tool to kind of like open up a new dialogue with folks that normally wouldn't be. See, the thing for me is visibility, like it is for a lot of things when it comes to being a person of color, being queer, being disabled. Like we don't really see ourselves, or being poor, like we're challenged with money, like we don't see ourselves. And I can speak to this as truth because I've had this conversation with a lot of artists in my situation. We initially don't feel like we belong, and that's because we don't see ourselves, we don't see people in our situations that look like us, that have our experiences in gallery spaces like that. And I think that for a way to bridge that with different galleries is to share our stories, like bring us in as well. Like our stories are just as valid. A lot of us don't have the resources to go to go to university. A lot of us can't, like myself, can't get there physically. I wasn't able to. I was able to go to college for a couple of years, and then I wasn't able to walk anymore. And you know, they did have like these little go-karts and stuff that would take you to class, but it didn't really work out because they didn't really show up. So there's just like a lot of little things that happen that kind of like are, you know, they're like barriers that a lot of people aren't aware of, that folks like myself are faced with. And I think that it's important to bridge that with galleries. And I really do think that if they can have that dialogue with people that are disabled, that are people of color and queer, and just a bunch of people who aren't, you know, wealthy and white, which I feel is mostly what we see in gallery spaces. So it's about that dialogue and that connection, which I'm really grateful for being able to have today with Maloof, because I feel like it's a really important space, because it's the current exhibit is about just that. It's about the artists in the Inland Empire in this area, because you know, we don't really have a very large art scene here, and to have like a space as beautiful and really just important like the Maloof space, I think it's this dialogue we're having now is pretty cool, and I hope that it can, you know, open up new spaces for more people. And thank you for that, actually.
Yeah, and if people aren't aware, we have a few of Raul's paintings actually outside in the garden in kind of an unusual presentation of paintings that they're in the garden. But you should definitely check those out. And yeah, if everybody out there, take note, reflect on what barriers to accessibility you might have the ability to change or influence. I think you know, you're not the only artist who has cited the DAW Center for the Arts as being a great community resource. So shout out to the DAW for that.
Yes.
We have more questions. I think we'll have to wrap it up though, and we won't be able to get to all of them today. And I also think that last, you know, your last commentary was a great place to end. So yes, everybody come visit the Maloof now that we're reopening on June 20th, 1 week from tomorrow, and go to the website for all the details. We're recording this, and if you missed part of it, if you joined late, you had to leave early, we'll be posting it to YouTube. And any final thoughts from you, Raul?
Support the arts.
Very good. Simple as that. All right. Well, thank you, Raul. Thanks everybody for joining us. Have a great weekend. Stay safe, be kind, and take care. All right. Bye, everybody.